Link TV, connecting you to the world. Link TV is viewer supported. Watch more at linktv.org.
Today, an Earth Focus special. Climate change. How will it affect us? We'll take a look. Can we do something about it? Denmark may have some answers, and we have a report. Link TV correspondent Miles Benson speaks with Achim Steiner, Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Program, about what the latest climate science really means. All coming up on this special Earth Focus. The natural world is an interdependent living system. We as a human species depend on it. It is the source of our food and our water, the products that support our energy and economic systems. We have been able to survive and thrive because of the bounty of nature, and because natural systems have been in balance. Today, we are on a collision course with nature. Our numbers are growing to some 9 billion people by mid-century. At the same time, our natural systems are reaching their limits, and our climate is changing, threatening millions with starvation, displacement, and disease. Climate is changing because we're burning coal and oil, and because we're clearing forests. These actions release greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, which accumulate in the atmosphere. We're now releasing greenhouse gases more rapidly than natural systems can remove them. Today, atmospheric concentrations of carbon dioxide are at 387 parts per million, higher than they have ever been over the last 500,000 years. As a result, temperatures are going up, affecting our lives and potentially our survival. People around the world are making their voices heard. In October, they came together for a widespread day of political action.
These issues affect everyone, and really, we're all invested in these issues, whether we know it or not.
Take a look at the last 5 years. Everything has changed, and I'm sure it has to do with the environment and how we care for the earth.
All of our actions have an impact on other people. We're all connected in some way.
We all need to be concerned about it. It's real, it's happening, the science is there.
Climate will certainly affect it if we destroy the forests, because the forests are what protect us from climate change.
And that affects not only my future, but everyone's future.
October 24th, 2009 saw 5,200 events in 181 countries calling for the reduction of CO2 in the atmosphere to 350 parts per million. The number activists say is the safe upper limit for carbon dioxide, and the number that can help us avoid runaway climate change.
They're saying that right now we're somewhere at 380, 390. We got to bring that level down.
Citizens, scientists, and activists took to the streets, mountains, parks, and reefs to demand in their own creative way that policymakers stop dragging their feet on climate change.
This morning, Israelis, Palestinians, and Jordanians together did the 350 around the shores of the Dead Sea. If Israelis and Palestinians and Jordanians can work together to try and stop climate change, surely you here in America can do everything that the world expects of you, that the world and our future generations need of you.
There were 300 actions in China, 200 in Africa, more than 1,800 in the United States, including a call for political action in front of the White House. The events were organized by 350.org, an international campaign to unite the world around solutions to the climate crisis. In the last century, average temperature went up 0.7 of a degree. Now this may not seem like much, but we're already seeing the impact.
Some of the most obvious ones are the big storms that we are now experiencing. The more insidious ones are how it will undermine livelihoods.
Zambia is now experiencing flooding in areas that normally don't get flooded. And so people have to relocate.
Of course, the changes are most dramatic in the Arctic, where the ice and the permafrost are melting so rapidly, but they're dramatic everywhere. The whole state of Missouri has changed by one climate zone. We grew camellias out of doors in St. Louis last year for the first time ever. They overwintered.
Talk about, in the case of the Himalayan Hindu Kush glaciers, which provides the headwater for most of the river systems, the Indus, the Ganges, the Brahmaputra, and then the Mekong on the East Asian side. And we're thinking these glaciers could be gone in 20, 30 years. So we're not talking about centuries.
And sea levels are rising, threatening small island nations and coastal areas worldwide. Low-lying Bangladesh, one of the world's poorest and most densely populated countries, stands to be among the worst affected. The population is already battered by catastrophic storm surges and flooding. With sea level rise, the situation will be worse, leaving at least 20% of the country underwater.
Scientists have given us a scenario where climate change, if left unabated, would have catastrophic consequences for island countries like my own. Many of our islands, only a few meters above sea level, will simply disappear due to sea level rise. And if they disappear, they will do so with all cultures.
To call attention to the plight of his country, the president of the Maldives held a cabinet meeting in an unlikely place, underwater, to demand rapid reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. If action isn't taken to save the Maldives today, we might not be able to save London, New York, or Hong Kong tomorrow. And according to the latest scientific data, tomorrow is coming sooner than we think.
This planet is very sensitive, just like our bodies. If someone tells you your temperature's up a degree, you start to worry about it. Well, the planet has the same capacity. It lives in a very sensitive regime.
Scientists say that we can't let average global temperatures rise above 2 degrees centigrade without catastrophic consequences. But now the latest findings show we may be on track to see a world that's even warmer than that.
We're headed to a 4-degree world by all the best estimates of IPCC-based models.
We're at the moment on a pretty much a worst-case scenario emissions trend, although it's gone down a little bit because of the global recession. But if you take that and you take the models which give us the highest rates of temperature change, you could potentially see 4 degrees of warming as early as 2060, which of course is on the 6 degree or so scale by the end of the century. So very, very major changes which I think would pretty much destroy human civilization as we know it and lead to a mass extinction of natural life. Now, both those things are avoidable at this point, but only if we respond urgently. And that means a complete transformation from business as usual, taking this situation as being an emergency and being prepared to put it at the top of our political and economic priority list.
Temperatures on the planet have always varied day to day, season to season. But when 4 degrees centigrade or 7 degrees Fahrenheit is added to the average annual global temperature, we see a world where humans struggle to survive. And this world could happen in 50 years. So what would it look like?
The Amazonia, which is one of the most beautiful tropical forests in the world, will transform itself into a desert. We're going to see water depletion, say, in the southwest of the United States, because we see a drought that's at least 20 or 30 years in the future, maybe longer.
But we're also looking at sea level rise, which is going to put literally hundreds of millions of people at risk, not only in rural areas, but in some of the world's largest cities as well. We are going to see large numbers of lives lost. It's not only in terms of potentially catastrophic famines, but just extreme climate events. Hurricane Katrina, writ large on a much more massive scale.
If the temperature rises by 4 degrees, there's really, there's no part of the planetary surface which remains unaffected. Even the deep seas would be hugely altered. The seas would be turning to acid overall as well, so all the coral reefs would be dead. The zones which are currently used to grow crops would be turning into deserts or would be affected by severe weather events. There's certainly potentially different areas of the land surface could be opened up, but those are areas which are currently covered by forest in northern Siberia and places. So I don't think it's really a transformation that we can look at as at all achievable, and there aren't really adaptation options, let's say, for a 4-degree world and upwards.
And we would be crossing thresholds we don't want to cross.
In particularly the Arctic, there is frozen in both the land and in the frozen ground underneath the ocean, the coastal ocean, is somewhere like twice as much energy contained in the methane stored there as we have used in the entire period of time we've had fossil fuels, the last 200 years. As we warm the planet, that methane starts to come out. Now, methane is a greenhouse gas. In fact, it's 20 to 30 times more powerful than CO2. Yes, it stays in the atmosphere for less time than CO2, but it still has the effect, and if it keeps coming out, that's a tipping point, because the only way you stop that is take the globe and put it in the refrigerator, and you can't do that overnight. You can't cool the planet down. So that's an accelerating effect, and we call that positive feedback, but it'll accelerate the process, make things warmer and warmer and warmer.
Even if industrialized nations make good on their most ambitious climate pledges, we are still headed for a 4-degree world. So says the Climate Change Science Compendium, a new report presented by the United Nations Environment Program in Washington, D.C. on September 24, 2009. Link TV correspondent Miles Benson speaks to the man behind the report, Achim Steiner, the executive director of the United Nations Environment Program.
Mr. Steiner, this new report seems to have had a sobering effect on you yourself. What is this compendium, what does it contain that really got your attention? What was the scariest thing in it?
What the report that has looked at the latest scientific publications since the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change presented its report 2.5 years ago is a very simple message. It's faster, it's more serious, and on a scale that exceeds many of the modeling exercises we had at our disposal 3 to 4 years ago. Global warming is not a theoretical phenomenon that science is still trying to explore. It is a present and real danger to the lives as we know it today. And I think it is the realization that, for instance, in the lifetime of my son, possibly, sea levels will rise not just by 50 centimeters, but up to 2 meters. And all the implications that it has for people's livelihoods, for where we have developed our infrastructure on the coastlines, for land that will be lost, for the ability of millions of Bangladeshi citizens who will have to move because they're in the flood deltas that will be destroyed, the water aquifers that will be destroyed by saltwater intrusion. Life will change as we know it today at a time when really we are still trying to bring more than half the world's population to a living standard that at least ensures basic decent conditions for all of us on this planet. So we have a fundamental physical challenge, but we also have many options for reversing that trend. And to me, the report really does say to the world, look, do not hesitate on the science any longer. This is real. Focus on what can be done about it and accelerate what you're doing because we are behind the curve.
It says things are getting worse and they're getting worse faster. And yet nothing really substantial is being done yet. Is the human species really lemmings? Are we headed over the cliff?
No, and I actually believe we are rational people who have never been confronted with quite the choice that we now have to make, which is to fundamentally reinvent our economies and our societies. We forget sometimes that it's only 200-300 years since we were just 1 billion people on this planet. So we are many more people. We have to share many more resources. We've gone through an industrial revolution. We've suddenly developed the capacity to fundamentally affect the life support systems on our planet. The atmosphere, the hydrological cycle, where water comes from, where it goes to pollution. All of this has put the planet under stress, and it has taken us a while to first of all have the science to understand it. Secondly, to also understand that it's a series of systems that we live in. We often talk about a social system and economic system. Well, there is a natural system out there of which we still know very little, but we are learning very fast that we have to understand it because we are causing things to happen we never anticipated. We have been slow. for political reasons, for reasons of ignorance, sometimes simply because it's easier not to have to think about fundamental change. The simple fact is, yes, at the beginning of the 21st century, as a civilization, as an American, as an African, as a European, we have to rethink the future, not in terms of turning our lights off, but in terms of efficiency, in terms of reducing pollution, in terms of enabling 9 billion people to share the air, the earth, the water, the natural resources on this planet. And that means reinventing our economies.
Mr. Steiner, you said that common sense can triumph in the end. Do you think that common sense is enough to overcome special interests in Washington, in Berlin, in Beijing, in Tokyo, everywhere in the world, in Africa and South America, that are going to rise up and resist change because it will inconvenience their own concerns?
I think so. I mean, not all of us live perhaps in perfect democracies, but public choice and our political systems allow us to vote in one party or one leader and vote another one out. The United States has just voted in a leader who is explicitly and firmly committed to addressing climate change. Common sense also is driven by the fact that if somebody tells me we have a problem and here are some of the solutions, why would I not pick the solutions? You don't even have to believe in global warming to see the rationale of using less fossil fuel, energy security, less pollution. Why would you want to pay more for having the same quality of light in your room than if you were offered a light bulb that uses only 1/4 of the energy? You don't have to be a climate change guru or believer to see the economic rationale, the political rationale on acting on a lot of these issues. So yes, I think common sense is a way to say people are not stupid. If you present them with the evidence and you give them a number of solutions and they have a choice, I think most of the time we do make the right choice and we do not behave like lemmings.
Mr. Steiner, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Making rational choices depends on seeing solutions that work, and countries like Denmark are becoming models for sustainable living.
I think that we have been able to decrease our energy consumption dramatically without any decrease in our life's quality or standard of living. So we would, on average, use maybe half of the energy of a classical American or Californian. 12,100 kilowatt hours per capita per year would be a Californian electricity consumption. We would only spend maybe half.
Globe TV correspondent Mike Soren visited Denmark and filed this report.
You can see Denmark's ubiquitous windmills however you arrive there, by air, land, or sea.
Today we have 30% of all our electricity stemming from renewables, primarily wind and biomass.
On the streets of Copenhagen, the Danes' commitment to living and working more sustainably has become part of their national culture.
As most other Copenhageners, I use my bicycle every day to go back and forth to the town hall.
To accelerate the transition to more sustainable electric vehicles, the government has suspended its painful new car tax on EVs, which can be as high as 180% for some carbon-burning cars.
We had a very tough wake-up call back in 1973, when actually we had a crisis, an oil crisis. At that time we were 99% dependent on imported fossil fuels. So it turned so bad that people were prohibited to drive their private cars on Sundays. We have had a growth rate of almost 80% in our economy since 1980 in Denmark. At the same time, we have managed to keep our energy consumption almost stable.
The people of this small Danish island called Samso already have. In the past 10 years, they've gone to 100% renewable energy and have reduced their carbon footprint by 147%.
We want people to continue to consume energy, but they should be aware where the energy comes from.
For the past 10 years, Soren Hermansen has turned his agricultural community on Samso Island into an energy experiment for the rest of the country. It is now the talk of the sustainability world.
Well, the real convincing aspect was that you could actually save money. The climate or the environmental impact was just kind of a positive side effect of it.
Land-based windmills take care of all of Samso's local energy needs. Their community investment in offshore windmills allows them to sell energy back to the mainland to offset the island's transport costs, which still depend on oil.
It's not just pure theory. It is doable in practical life. It's not that difficult. most of the solutions that we need. They are there already. And if you use them, you can save money.
Copenhagen's Mayor Klaus Bondam is building more bike lanes and bridges and plan to convert the city's fleet of cars to all-electric vehicles as part of Copenhagen's master plan to become the world's eco-metropolis by 2015.
It's in our nerves or in our genes that we have an understanding that you can actually harm your surroundings if you don't think about what you're doing.
Denmark is launching one of the first nationwide electric vehicle networks.
I bought my first electric car in 2005. 2 months later I bought another one for my wife.
Peter Christensen and his wife are part of a European Union feasibility study on the practicality of making the switch to EVs.
Don't have to care about gear. It's only forwards and backwards. It's very easy.
In addition to buying EVs, the Christensen family has a 10-year government-backed mortgage on their own 1-megawatt windmill for powering their cars, all of their other household needs, and to sell power back to their utility company.
It's making money.
So in order to accommodate a bigger proportion of wind production, we must find a storage for the electricity to level it out. If we store the unstable wind energy in batteries, why not put 4 wheels underneath the battery and then you have the electric car?
Closing the loop on renewable energy and electric vehicles is the holy grail of sustainable transportation. Dong Energy, the country's largest energy company, is partnering with Better Place, a global electric vehicle services provider, on a nationwide electric vehicle network of charge spots and battery switching stations to further reduce Denmark's auto and small truck emissions, the fastest growing source of carbon in the atmosphere.
In Denmark, we have a population that's very focused on the environment. We have a lot of wind and therefore the ability to generate renewable energy.
One of the things we can do is actually to be an example country, and in Copenhagen be an example city for other countries and cities, how sustainability can actually walk hand in hand with the financial and economic growth.
In Copenhagen, this is Mike Soren reporting for Globe TV.
Natural processes like volcanic activity and swamps release greenhouse gases, but it's people who do the most damage. Our fuel, our land use, and our transportation contribute to economic growth, but they also warm the climate. So is climate change the inevitable cost of human progress?
The climate change problem is was an unavoidable byproduct of the Industrial Revolution, and humanity has always lived and has developed itself by burning stuff. I mean, I would call us the fire ape, Homo pyrophilius. That's what really defines us as opposed to other animals. The point is, I suppose, that burning stuff has allowed us to evolve very big brains and a high level of intelligence, which in turn allows us to imagine and think our ways through these problems in a collective way. Now that's new, and that requires cultural evolution that we've not yet had.
So where do we go from here? A multilateral, legally binding agreement that enables all countries to contribute equitably to the climate effort would be an important step forward. Carbon emissions need to be cut in half within 40 years to ensure that temperatures don't rise above 2 degrees. And to do that, we have to change the way we live, the way we work, and what we value.
First of all, decoupling growth from carbon emissions. Because, yes, we all want to continue growing, we have aspirations to grow, but we have to now decouple from carbon emissions. For the last 200,000 years that we have been on this planet, we have never decoupled carbon emissions from growth. So this is a new experience, nothing short of reinventing our lifestyles, our workplaces, the way we interrelate with each other in society. This is, yes, also a national security issue. The other thing that we need to do, we have to decouple our personal satisfaction from consumption.
No doubt do we need a total change in how we think about economic development in the world.
What we need globally is a price on carbon so that all the countries begin to make this transition simultaneously. If we had a $50 to $100 tax on carbon, if we had an international quota system where the amount of carbon that was sucked out of the ground or dug out of the ground was subject to a budget, and that was auctioned amongst the companies, you could raise trillions of dollars, you could use that to fund adaptation and to fund the transformation in a low carbon direction that we need. But you know, that requires the politics to be sorted out first. I mean, the sequence I would suggest is that you get the politics sorted, that then changes the economics, which in turn brings on the technologies. At the moment we're trying to do those things in reverse.
It's very hard to make a problem like this you know, rise up into the top tier level of issues politically. And you almost get to a question of, you know, are we really wired as a species to deal with long-term problems?
Humanity, when it's faced with ultimate crises, sometimes often says, uh-oh, I got to deal with this. We haven't gotten to the uh-oh point yet where humanity says, we got to deal with this.
But for some companies, the uh-oh moment has already come, and they are taking action.
eBay, you have Levi's, you have Nike, Starbucks, Sun Microsystems, and others. And these companies have banded together to support climate change legislation that's in line with the science. The challenge of climate change is enormous, but the business community is increasingly seeing it as an opportunity. And the Obama administration here in the United States is trying to carry us toward a low-carbon green economy on the backs of a private sector focus. It will be, in the end, the business community that has to invest in the green economy through infrastructure, through more sustainable products, and more sustainable ways of generating energy.
Government can set the policy, say putting a price on carbon, establishing policies to introduce renewable energy. Ultimately, the private sector is going to have to actually deliver the solutions, you know, whether it be inventing new energy technologies, figuring out new ways to save energy. But government creates the framework in which that private sector innovation occurs.
Going to a green energy system is one that's going to really be able to try and force the economy to become much more efficient and to become much more sustainable. We can't just go on using fossil fuels indefinitely. We're going to have to change our cars over in any case because of the limited amount of oil that exists. So the question is, how hard do you push that kind of thing?
With joint effort, you know, we can do it. And we are going into a global village anyway, so I don't see it as a problem for Zambia. I see it as something that requires collective action. And isn't that what this globalization is all about?
Right now, continue to mobilize. Continue to organize, continue to energize, continue to speak to the powers that be. If we lose this moment, we lose everything. We lose humanity.
Link TV is the only U.S. network dedicated to global and national news, uncompromising documentaries, and diverse cultural programs. Programs which connect you to the world. To learn more, visit linktv.org.